The tension in the London studio was electric even before the red light on the camera flickered on. The crew moved briskly, the hum of whispered instructions mixing with the faint buzz of anticipation. Piers Morgan sat across from Denzel Washington, his notes stacked neatly, eyes gleaming with that unmistakable hunger for a moment. Denzel, ever composed, leaned back in his chair, fingers interlocked, posture calm but alert. The interview was billed as an exclusive, a deep conversation with a Hollywood legend, but anyone who knew Piers knew it was never just an interview. It was a test of control. The lights dimmed slightly, the studio audience hushed, and the countdown began. 3, 2, 1. Piers flashed his camera-ready grin. Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Tonight, we have one of the most respected actors of our generation. Two-time Academy Award winner, director, and man of unshakable faith, Mr. Denzel Washington. Applause filled the room. Denzel nodded politely, offering that famous modest smile, a smile that could disarm even the harshest critic. Good to be here, Piers, he said smoothly. Good to have you, Piers replied, the grin tightening slightly. Now, Denzel, you've been in this business for over 4 decades. You've played kings, cops, criminals, preachers, just about everything. But through it all, you've been very vocal about faith and discipline. How do you maintain that in a city that some would say is morally bankrupt? The question was loaded, and both men knew it. Denzel's smile didn't fade. He paused, tilting his head slightly. You stay grounded. You don't let this industry tell you who you are. You remember where you came from and who you answer to. The crowd murmured approvingly, but Piers wasn't looking for applause, he was looking for friction. But surely, he pressed, Hollywood isn't exactly a place that rewards integrity. I mean, you've worked with directors and actors caught in scandals, big ones. Doesn't that challenge your principles? Denzel's eyes narrowed slightly, though his tone remained steady. My principles aren't challenged by other people's behavior. I can't control what others do, but I can control what I stand for. Fair enough, Piers said, leaning forward. But are there times when you've had to compromise? Maybe take a role that didn't align with your beliefs? Because some people say you play it too safe, too clean. The jab was subtle, but Denzel caught it. He leaned forward too, resting his elbows on his knees. You call it playing it safe. I call it knowing who I am. There's nothing safe about standing your ground in an industry that profits from controversy. That drew another round of applause, which Piers ignored. He smirked slightly. Come on, Denzel. Everyone in Hollywood has skeletons. Even you must have made choices you regret. Denzel's expression didn't waver. Everyone has regrets, Piers. But that's not for entertainment. Isn't it, though? Piers shot back quickly. You live in the public eye. The public buys your movie tickets, supports your fame. Don't they deserve honesty? The public deserves truth in storytelling, Denzel said, his tone cooling. Not gossip disguised as journalism. That line drew a small gasp, followed by applause. Even the cameramen exchanged subtle glances. Piers' jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being deflected so elegantly. He shuffled his cue cards, his voice now carrying a sharper edge. All right, let's talk truth, then, he said. There've been reports that you've turned down roles because you didn't want to work with certain directors or co-stars who live, let's say, different lifestyles. Is that true? A hush swept through the studio. Denzel's gaze froze him in place. I pick my projects based on the story, the message, and the people involved. Period. Anything else you've heard, keep it in the rumor mill. Piers smiled thinly. So that's not a denial. That's a dismissal, Denzel replied. And you'd be wise to hear the difference. The audience let out an audible, ooh, but Piers didn't back down. You see, Denzel, I think people want to know if you practice what you preach. You talk about values and faith. Watch yourself, Denzel interjected quietly, but with weight. Excuse me, Piers feigned surprise. You heard me, Denzel said, his tone calm but cold. Don't confuse curiosity with provocation. They're not the same. The silence that followed was thick. Even Piers' signature grin faltered. A producer off-camera gestured to move on, but Piers couldn't resist the bait. I'm just doing my job, asking tough questions. Isn't that what truth demands? Answers. Truth demands respect, Denzel said firmly. And you crossed that line 5 minutes ago. The audience broke into nervous applause. Piers shifted in his seat, clearly agitated now. So, you're saying I'm disrespectful? I've interviewed presidents, kings, the Pope himself. And maybe you should have listened more than you talked, Denzel cut in, his voice rising just enough to reclaim the space. The crowd erupted in cheers. Piers' face reddened. So, what, you're walking away from accountability? You can play the hero on screen but not answer a few simple questions off it. That was it. Denzel stood up, his presence towering, his calm authority filling the room like thunder before a storm. You want accountability? Fine, here it is. I'm accountable to my God, my family, and my work. Not to you, and not to anyone who profits off disrespect. The studio went silent. Denzel reached up, unclipped his microphone, and placed it neatly on the table. You invited me here to talk about art, but you wanted a spectacle. I'm not your show. He turned toward the exit, the cameras following his every step. Morgan called out, desperate to salvage the segment, Denzel, come on, don't walk out. People will say you can't handle tough questions. Denzel stopped just short of the doorway and turned slightly. People can say whatever they want. My peace doesn't depend on their noise. And with that, he walked off. The studio door shut softly behind him, leaving only the hum of dead air. Piers blinked, caught completely off guard. He tried to recover with an awkward chuckle. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Denzel Washington, clearly passionate about his values, he said, forcing a grin. Guess we hit a nerve. The audience didn't applaud. They just watched him, waiting for what he'd say next. Piers fumbled with his papers. We'll be right back after the break, he muttered, his voice a shade too tight. But the cameras had already captured everything, the flash of irritation in Piers' eyes, the quiet authority in Denzel's departure, and that powerful image of a man walking away, unbothered, unbroken, and completely in control. Within hours, the internet would explode with clips of the moment, fans quoting Denzel's final line like scripture, my peace doesn't depend on their noise. What was meant to be another sensational interview for Piers Morgan had turned into a global lesson in grace under fire. Sunrise the next morning, Denzel Washington's walk-off had become the internet's new obsession. The clip, less than a minute long, had already racked up millions of views across TikTok, YouTube, and X, formerly Twitter. The moment where Denzel paused at the door, turned, and said, my peace doesn't depend on their noise, was being replayed like an iconic movie line. Memes, edits, fan tributes, and even slow-motion montages flooded social media. It was more than just celebrity drama, it had become a cultural statement. On TikTok, people were posting clips of themselves mouthing Denzel's line, turning it into a sound trend. Instagram Reels paired his calm, controlled exit with motivational music. The hashtag Denzel walks off shot to the top of trending lists in both the US and the UK. Within hours, it had morphed into something bigger, a discussion about dignity, respect, and media ethics. Piers crossed the line, one user wrote. Denzel handled that like a king. Another posted, he didn't walk off in anger, he walked off in peace. There's a difference. By mid-morning, entertainment outlets were churning out headlines. Denzel Washington shuts down Piers Morgan in fiery interview exit. Piers Morgan goes too far, again. Hollywood legend walks away from disrespect. Clips of the unedited footage leaked online, reportedly from someone in the studio audience. The raw version showed even more than the televised broadcast, the growing tension, the look of irritation on Piers' face, and the silent awe of the audience as Denzel left the set. The authenticity of it made it all the more powerful. While Denzel stayed silent, his name dominated every talk show and morning segment. CNN replayed the clip with commentary from body language experts who analyzed every detail, from Denzel's breathing to his steady tone. He wasn't angry, one expert explained. He was asserting boundaries with calm authority. That's what made it so impactful. Piers Morgan, however, wasn't one to back down easily. That evening, he posted a tweet. Greater than, Denzel Washington is a brilliant actor, but apparently allergic to tough questions. Shame, could have been a great conversation. It was exactly the kind of baiting comment people expected from him, and it backfired spectacularly. The replies came fast and furious. You mean it was a great conversation, right until you ruined it, one user shot back. Tough questions aren't disrespect, another wrote, but you were. Celebrities began to weigh in. Viola Davis reposted the clip with the caption, Grace under fire. Always has been, always will be. Jamie Foxx commented. That's why he's Denzel. Cool, calm, collected. No time for foolishness. Even Samuel L. Jackson chimed in with his trademark edge. You mess with a lion, don't be shocked when he walks off your set. By day 2, #respect like Denzel was trending. Fans were using it as a rallying cry for self-respect, boundaries, and calm strength. It wasn't just a celebrity story anymore, it had become a social movement about refusing to tolerate disrespect, no matter who's watching. Meanwhile, inside the network that produced Piers Morgan Uncensored, executives weren't celebrating. The clip had gone viral, yes, but not in their favor. Advertisers started to pull back, concerned about tone and guest relations. Public relations teams scrambled to do damage control. According to leaks from production staff, even Piers' own crew had felt he pushed too hard. "You could feel it in the room," one anonymous staffer told The Guardian. Denzel wasn't being difficult, he was being firm. Piers kept poking. Everyone knew it was going to blow. On the third day, Denzel made his first public appearance since the incident. He attended a charity gala in Los Angeles, wearing a dark suit and his trademark humility. Cameras swarmed him, reporters shouting questions about the interview. Denzel stopped briefly, smiled, and simply said, "Respect is non-negotiable. That's all I'll say." Then he walked inside. That 6-word statement made headlines the next morning. "Respect is non-negotiable," Denzel Washington speaks after viral walk-off. It was enough. He didn't need to explain, defend, or drag anyone. His silence spoke louder than Piers Morgan's 1,000-word rants. Meanwhile, Piers continued trying to spin the situation. On his next show, he aired an edited version of the interview, adding commentary about the dangers of cancel culture and Hollywood hypocrisy. He positioned himself as the victim, a journalist who can't even ask a question without being attacked. But viewers weren't buying it. The comment sections under his official upload were brutal. "You asked," he answered. "You didn't like the answer. You tried to corner him, and he outclassed you. Respect goes both ways, Piers." By the end of the week, Piers' credibility took another hit. A poll on social media showed 82% of viewers sided with Denzel. Editorials began appearing in major publications. The Atlantic ran a piece titled, "The Art of Walking Away, What Denzel Washington Taught Us About Power." Time magazine published a column praising Denzel's restraint, calling it a masterclass in handling provocation without surrendering composure. Inside Hollywood, the moment became part of industry folklore. Publicists and media trainers began using it as a case study. When your client is baited, remember, Denzel walked off. Actors, directors, and even athletes began echoing his words in interviews. But perhaps the most striking thing was how Denzel himself remained completely unbothered. He didn't engage in interviews, didn't tweet, didn't post a thing. He let the storm rage around him, and, just as always, his silence became his power. 2 weeks later, while promoting his film overseas, a journalist cautiously brought up the subject again. Denzel smiled faintly and said, "Sometimes you've got to remind people that silence is not weakness, it's wisdom." The crowd applauded. That line became another viral quote. Meanwhile, reports surfaced that Piers Morgan's show had seen a noticeable dip in viewership. Sponsors were reconsidering their contracts. One insider leaked that the Denzel incident made people realize how toxic the interviews had become. But Piers, ever defiant, brushed it off in a follow-up tweet. "Greater than, I don't regret a single question. If people can't handle honest conversation, that's on them." The response? Another wave of backlash. One comment summed up public sentiment perfectly: "There's a difference between honesty and hostility. You just don't know it." By the time a month had passed, the media frenzy had quieted, but the legacy of that moment lingered. Clips from the interview were still circulating, now used in motivational videos, corporate seminars, and even classrooms. It became shorthand for emotional intelligence, restraint, and the quiet strength of boundaries. At an awards ceremony later that year, Denzel received a Lifetime Achievement honor. During his speech, he didn't mention Piers by name, but there was no doubt whom he meant when he said, "Sometimes in life, people will try to drag you into their chaos. The smartest thing you can do is refuse the invitation. Keep your peace, it's worth more than any argument." The audience rose to its feet, applauding not just the actor, but the man, the same man who, with quiet dignity, had walked off a stage rather than stoop to disrespect. That moment with Piers Morgan would be remembered not as a scandal, but as a symbol. A reminder that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just stands up, walks away, and lets the silence speak volumes. Hashtag Denzel Washington, hashtag Piers Morgan, hashtag talk show drama, hashtag Hollywood ethics, hashtag media respect, hashtag Denzel walks off, hashtag boundaries, hashtag celebrity news, hashtag grace under pressure, hashtag respect is non-negotiable.